So as far as this Charlo doubleheader, um, great fucking undercard. The way it was set up was they split it. If you didn't buy the fight, it was set up into essentially two separate pay-per-view cards where, Jamal and Derevyanchenko headlining part one, Jermel and Jason Rosario headlining part two. And the first part of the card had John Real Casimero. I believe he's a champion at 112 pounds, if not 115. I might even be wrong about that. He might be champion at 118. But very awkward style, explosive puncher, 5'2.5" or whatever. Not a very short guy, but super awkward to deal with. You had Brandon Figueroa after that, really putting it on this guy Vasquez, who is related to Israel Vasquez, Damian Vasquez, the nephew of Israel Vasquez, really put it on him. That fight probably went on a little bit too long. And then we had Jermall Charlo against Sergey Derevyanchenko. Now, I'm going to start with this because I talk about it every time I feel this way. The scorecards on this first fight, the Charlo Derevyanchenko fight, were very wide. And I did not see a wide fight. I saw a close fight. I didn't really score it formally the first time I watched it live, but I scored it after the fact. And I scored the fight 114 to 114. I would have to go back and watch it again, maybe score it again. Obviously, when you're scoring a fight live, you really only get one chance. But me being unbiased, I scored the fight 114 to 114, which is 6 rounds to 6. I think the way I had it set up, I had Charlo up 6-3 through 9, and I thought Derevyanchenko won the last 3 rounds. So, that being said, though, the fight did look somewhat similar to what I thought it could look like. The difference is that Jermall adjusted. Jermall's boxing skills, to me, were much more consistent and tricky than I was given credit for. He uses jab real nice. He's got nice long punches, and there was, at least through the first 4 or 5 rounds, he really did a nice job of keeping Derevyanchenko at the end of his length and keeping the fight on his terms with just long punches. And ultimately he buzzed Derevyanchenko a little bit early, and he really had control over the pace and the geography of the fight basically through the first 5-6 rounds. And eventually, Derevyanchenko, being the world-class guy that he is, he started getting on the inside, started landing some body shots, started landing that right hand, the straight right hand, and the roundhouse over the top. And I would say down the stretch that it was a very competitive fight. And that Derevyanchenko at times could pin Charlo on the ropes and could land combinations. But there was also a lot of instances of him getting Charlo on the ropes and Charlo doing something to fuck his timing up, whether it be, sticking that long jab out there or feinting or tying up. But he was really good about not letting Derevyanchenko get set for long periods of time. Even if he would get a little combination off. Charlo always had something for him, or would eventually just make him start missing. And, I think down the stretch, he took his foot off the gas a little bit. I think he could have closed the show a little stronger, but again, it's like, I said he wasn't going to win at all, and he won the fight. But, the other thing that he does that I really like, my favorite little move that he does, is his check hook. And the check hook, if you don't know, is essentially you're throwing your front hand hook as you're stepping back and your opponent is stepping forward. So therefore, momentum is coming, you're turning it over and sort of rolling out. And he does that move really well, and it made Derevyanchenko very hesitant to charge him and try to get in his space. And that part was very impressive, man, between the long jabs and the long right hands, the check hooks when Derevyanchenko would try to get in on the inside. It just made it very difficult for Derevyanchenko to do what he wanted to do. But when he was able to. When he was able to get Charlo on the inside and pin him in spots, he landed a lot of effective shots. But at the end of the day, the way you're scoring the fight is round by round. Who's controlling the greatest amount of time, who's landing the clean, effective punches, and who's working, the most consistently. You have to look at each round as, who would I rather be at the end of that round? This fight had a lot of close rounds, which is frustrating to see scorecards like 118, 110, 117, 111, even 116, 112. That's at least like within the realm of reality, but this seemed like a more of a flip a coin kind of fight than the scores would indicate. And I think that's unfortunate because, what would have happened if Derevyanchenko did even better than that? Would they have been paying attention? Would the judges, have taken notice of the work he was doing? So that part of it is frustrating as a fan. You want to see these guys get a fair shake, man. You want to see everybody get a fucking 50-50 chance in every fight. Like, you have to win the fight to win the fight. And that's ultimately been one of my biggest critiques of the Charlos over time. And that's not necessarily even their responsibility, that they've been the beneficiaries of, being the A side, favorable judging, favorable commentary, And that's why I think it was so surprising for Jermell to lose that decision to Tony Harrison, because they're sort of used to, this is how much I have to do to win a decision. And over time, you do that often enough, and what you think it takes to win a round gets a little bit skewed. I think as they go up in competition, though, their intensity ramps up, their passion ramps up. That's what's great about these guys, man. They really are passionate. They're passionate athletes. They love what they do. They want to show you. They want to fucking prove it to you. They want to prove people like me fucking wrong. And you got to like that, man. How can you not fucking like that? That's just good entertainment as far as I'm concerned. And I guess that's a good segue into the second part of the card, which had Jermell Charlo taking on Jason Rosario. And this was a weird little fight, man. This was a weird little fight. First of all, I feel like Jermell is a little bit more of an explosive, wide swinger than Jermall. The power, even though he's got a lower knockout percentage, the power is just jarring. It comes out of nowhere. And, Rosario felt that. So, my prediction on this fight, my thinking on this fight was that, having seen Rosario against J-Rock, I thought that, because Julian Williams fucking hit Rosario very hard in that fight, and it didn't really move him too much. My thinking was that, Rosario was going to be able to basically handle Charlo's power, and that his power and pressure over time was going to get to him, and that later on in the fight, he'd be rolling downhill a little bit and either get a late round stoppage or win a decision, and that's not what happened. What happened was they came out and, even though Jermell's jab is a little less consistent, he's a little more unpredictable than Jermall, and he can fight off the back foot. He kind of pounces, like he'll be moving and just swing something crazy at you. So you have to be very aware, and as a result, Rosario gets dropped in the first. And you could see he was a little buzzed. It was like a weird knockdown, but it was up on the top of the head. Clearly rung his bell a little bit, and he didn't really get into the fight until round 3 or 4. And so starting in round 3 or 4, what you see is Rosario in stretches is able to, similarly to Derevyanchenko, kind of get Jermell on the ropes, land a couple of body shots in combination, and you could hear the power on his shots. You could hear that he hit very hard. You could hear that, when he really sat down and let it go, that the power was real. But ultimately, what happened is then Charlo dropped him again, I believe in the 6th, and I think legitimately buzzed him, and it was very close to the end of the round. I think Rosario got lucky. in between those knockdowns, what you had was a super competitive fight. Rosario at times able to land combinations. Charlo at times able to fight really nicely off the back foot, feinting, jabbing, kind of throwing something wild and unpredictable to keep Rosario, with his hands in his pockets a little more. And then what was really smart too, because Jermel's upper body movement and head movement is so good, eventually Rosario's reaching and eventually he's following and he's a little impatient. He's not, cutting the ring off. And you could tell by the 6th round that at least tactically, Jermel had a pretty good grip on what he needed to do. And then in the 8th, it happened, man. Out of fucking nowhere, this little jab to the body puts Rosario down, and it looked like he had a seizure. I don't think he did. I think what happened was he got hit in the diaphragm or in the abdomen when he wasn't engaged and he wasn't ready for it, and it knocked the wind out of him. But it looked like a seizure, but he literally just sat on the canvas, gulping for air. And it was hard to watch, actually. And it was such a sudden punch. There's one other instance I can think of a fighter getting knocked out to the body, and I can't remember the opponent, but I do remember that at one time Sergey Kovalev knocked somebody out with a jab to the body. It's very rare that you see that, but it's an odd mechanics, right? Because if you're coming forward, your abdomen's not engaged, or you're on your exhale, and I slip it in and I have nice form and I'm rooted in my feet, like, there is something about the physics of that, of you coming toward me and of me sticking it out at the right time. It hits you right at the peak point of power. That's a hard punch to take, and I think it's just a testament to Jermel's punching power. He's really a very, very explosive puncher, which, again, I wasn't really giving him enough credit for that. I didn't think, just based on the shots that Williams had hit Rosario with, I didn't think Jermel could hurt him. And that's where I had the fight wrong. I didn't think that there was really the possibility that on a one-punch basis that, Charlo could completely fuck with Rosario's game plan and have him, keeping his hands in his pocket. I didn't think that was what was going to happen. But that's what happened. And that's what great fighters do, is they adjust to their opponent's strength. They adjust in the moment. They make changes on the fly. And the truth is, man, anything this guy Rosario was going to do, I think over time, Jermel had an answer for it, man. It got to a couple points, too, where he was holding a lot. And Rosario would get close to him. He'd tie him right up, walk him to the center. And, I don't think Rosario's inside game is real sophisticated. There's the other side of it, too, where Rosario's boxing game needs a lot of work. And, he was able to hurt Julian Williams. He was able to hit Williams. I can't necessarily speak to that performance, but just comparatively as two elite level guys, it seems like maybe that was an off night for Williams, and less about, what a killer Rosario is. I think he's still a tough kid. He's 25 years old. He's 20-2 with 14 knockouts. He is a good fighter. I think that he could still be a factor at 154, but he wasn't any match for this guy ultimately. Even if in stretches he could make the fight competitive and even win some rounds, I would say. I think he won 2 or 3 rounds of the fight. The other thing I noticed too, if I'm being brutally honest, he looked a little bit overtrained. His legs didn't look great to me. His punch resistance didn't look great to me. And he looked a little drawn at the weigh-in. That's just my opinion. Those are generally the signs of somebody that struggled to make weight. If your punch resistance isn't that good, you look a little drained. You're not as explosive. And that, that's on him. I'm not making excuses for him just because I predicted he would win. But I am saying that he looked a little overtrained. And that's something that he's going to have to work on, in these big fights, of knowing that point. What's the point where the training is beneficial, and what's the point where it kind of stops helping me? And he has to find that for himself, ultimately. I think that point is different for everybody. I bet if you ask somebody like the Charlos, they would tell you, there is no point. You know, I'm going to fucking train till I fucking hit the floor. That doesn't really work for everybody, you know? And I'm sure, you know, even with all the Lions only shit and whatever, I'm sure the Charlos have a very good idea, very good gauge of what that point, that training point is like. I got to cut it off now, because if I don't cut it off now, it's going to stop being advantageous. It's going to start hurting me. So these are all lessons for Rosario. And I think that both of the Charlo brothers ultimately had great performances. They probably learned a lot for themselves going forward. I mean, particularly Jamal, you know, being in such a, you know, a physical testing fight, you know, when you come out of the other side on that, that can only make you better. Because I don't think, you know, it wasn't like such a physical, you know, Barrera Morales fight where I feel like it took years off, but it was a rough fight against a top level guy who's shown he's a top level guy against other top level guys. And, you know, I think it opens up the door for Jamal to be like, you know, one of these dudes has to fight me, be it Danny Jacobs, Golovkin, Demetrius Andrade. Somebody's got to start fucking paying attention and fight this guy. I think Andrade and Jamal is the fight, you know, and I think that's one you can make because they're both, you know, they're both middleweights. They're both in their prime. Why the fuck not? They're both having a hard time getting Golovkin and dudes of that caliber. So why not make that fight happen now? As far as Jermell, you know, they talked about it a bunch, but junior middleweight is really stacked right now. It's really a very stacked weight class. He has a lot of options. My personal pick for his next fight, I would choose one of two fighters. I would have Jermell fight either Erislandy Lara, the Cuban champion, who you've heard me talk about a bunch on this show, or I would have him fight Jarrett Hurd, who was actually the last guy to beat Erislandy Lara. I think that both of those guys would give him a very difficult time, and beating either of them, I think, would only further solidify that he's the number one guy in the division. I think he did that in this fight. This fight was his way of being like, this is my fucking weight class. He's got 3 belts now, so he's the unified champion. You know, everybody has to go through him now. Or he needs to fight the other champion, Patrick Teixeira from Brazil, and unify the division, man. Have an undisputed junior middleweight champion. You know, that's something to fucking get excited about. And he's 3 out of 4 belts, you know. And if he's not going to fight any of those guys, he's got Julian Williams. He's got Brian Castano. He's got a lot of very, very difficult, legitimate opponents to go to. Jamal's options are not quite as wide open because of the promotional difficulties, but as far as the boxing landscape, I want to see these guys in with the top because they are the top now. There's no denying that with the level of opponents they've beaten here.